So if you're anything like me, you clicked on this video because you want to see what you're made of, get in amazing shape, complete your first triathlon, and maybe even become an Ironman without any special skills or insane endurance or experience with running and cycling and swimming. And whether that's the case or you're just interested in how people from any age and anywhere in the world get in amazing shape to impress their friends and families and themselves, then this video is for you. So look, training for a triathlon can become harder and harder when you have a full-time job and a family. And I get it. Seeing thousands of people completing Ironmans every year and people so far ahead of you can make everything seem so overwhelming. And the easiest thing to do is to convince yourself that it's too late to start training for an Ironman for you and not give it the fair shot that it deserves. And that's exactly why I put together this video, to break down an easy step-by-step guide to get started with triathlon in your spare time, so that you can push through your doubts and get a head start on becoming what you know truly deep down that you are capable of. And look, I get it. Why should you listen to me instead of some other dude on the internet who completed an Ironman? Over the last 10 years, I've been a professional triathlete as part of the Danish national team. And now I work as a physiotherapist and elite performance specialist for elite teams and world-class athletes. I've taken complete beginners to world-class athletes in as little as 3 years. I spent most of my time taking on what's on the cutting edge of science and applying it to athletes of all levels to help them go further, faster. Now my goal is to take what I've learned working with professional athletes and give it away to you for completely free. I see a ton of coaches gatekeeping their secrets behind a $997 paywall. But I'm on a mission to help 10,000 people discover the power of triathlon, to surprise themselves with what they are truly capable of doing. And I'm gonna do this by giving you every single resource you need for completely free. So congratulations on taking your first few steps in this crazy world of triathlon. But most importantly, sit back, take out a pen and paper, and get ready to take notes. Because at the end of this video, it will be time for you to take massive action. With that said, let's dive in. So I put together this guide for you guys to give you a step-by-step process of getting started with triathlon. Steps 1 to 3 are centered mostly for beginners, you know, getting started, planning your training, and then it goes to completing your first few training sessions, how to keep progressing, and doing that over and over again until you build up a solid foundation. Now, step 4 and 5 is race day strategies. So this will be for a bit more advanced triathletes, people who have already gotten in great shape and are looking to optimize their nutrition and race day strategies. So in step 4, we teach you how to optimize your transitions. And in step 5, we'll teach you how to fuel your training and race for optimal performance, so you might one day qualify for the age group world championships. Step 5 is a lot more attainable than you think, and I was able to win the age group European championships in just 2 years after I started. So let's jump straight into step number 1. The first thing that any triathlete has to do is to pick their distance. There are 4 main distances in triathlon, and those are sprint distance, which is 750 meter swim, a 20 kilometer bike ride, and a 5 kilometer run. Olympic distance, which is a 1500 meter swim, 40 kilometer bike ride, and a 10 kilometer run. Half distance, also known as half Ironman distance, which is 1.9 kilometer swim, 90 kilometer bike ride, and 21.1 kilometer run. And a full distance, also known as Ironman distance, which is 3.8 kilometer swim, 180 kilometer bike ride, and a 42.2 kilometer run. And then there's a bunch of distances in between, but those are the main 4. I want to preface this by saying every distance sucks. No matter what distance you choose from sprint to Ironman, it has its upsides and its downsides. There is no perfect distance to jump straight into, but there's a couple of questions that you can ask yourself to see where you fit in. For example, in the Ironman distances, the races are bigger and it's more known to the broader public, but it's also going to take a lot longer to train for and takes time to prepare. On the flip side, a sprint triathlon is a lot easier to train for, depending on how fast you want to go, of course, but you're probably not going to test your limits in the same way as a half distance or a full distance triathlon. But what I do and what I recommend my clients do is to look at their training age. You see, training age is the amount of years that you have been training a specific thing. So if you've never trained endurance a day in your life and you don't even know how to run or swim or bike, then I would start with the lowest barrier of entry, which is the shortest distance that I can get my hands on. However, if you have been running or cycling or swimming for years, then it could be feasible to start with a half Ironman, and some people even start with the full distance, full Ironman. In fact, it all comes down to what is your specific goal. Some people, including myself, just think that going as fast as possible is extremely fun, and if that's you, then the shorter distances might be the best choice. They also make it a lot easier to get better fast because you can do so many more races during a season than if you were doing full distances. But if your goal is to push yourself to the limits to see how far you can go with your endurance, then going for an Ironman straight away could be the best choice. However, I strongly suggest that your first triathlon is not an Ironman. If your only goal is to complete an Ironman, but you don't want to improve yourself, you just want to put it on your resume, then it's just not going to work. You're gonna get burned out eventually, and you're just not going to enjoy the process. You might be able to push for a little bit, but after 3 or 4 months, your initial motivation will start to fizzle out and you will become burned out. So find the reasons why it excites you, and before long, you will become a total nerd about this. Now, I recommend every single athlete that I work with to do at least one short distance before going longer, because you learn so much from your first triathlon experience. You'll learn a lot about how your body reacts, but you also learn a lot of tips and tricks from other athletes about subtle small things that make a huge difference in the end. Also, local races are very cheap and are just a great training day. Now that you got your goal, it's time to create your training schedule. So for the exact number of swims and bikes and runs, obviously, you can use ChatGPT to help you, but I would recommend that you look at the time spent in each sport first and combine it with your strengths and weaknesses. So the place where most time is gained or lost is on the bike. And this is simply because this is what takes the longest. If when you start out, you are equally good in all 3 disciplines, then you should spend most of your time on the bike. Next comes running, and then finally the swim. But if you have no experience with open water swimming when you start out, like most athletes do, then you need to spend a lot of time here. And that is despite the fact that you'll spend the least amount of time in the water during the race. And I'll tell you why. It's simply because if you are not comfortable with going in open water, and then on race day, you're standing there on the start line with hundreds of other athletes, and you have like this much room between you when you go out in the water, then you're going to have a horrible experience at the start of your race, which will just make the rest of the race so much worse. So you want to be comfortable with swimming. First in the pool and then in open water. And I would even suggest that you try some open water swimming in close groups before your race day. Now, you know how much time you're going to spend to train each discipline. Now you want to build up to your race with progressive overload. Over time, you need to train longer and or harder. The easiest way to do this is to divide your season into periods. Start with a base training period where you're just building up your distance. Then go into a preparation period where you introduce a bit of hard work. Then you want to go into a specialization period, which is the hard period, where you'll do long and hard training or as close to your competition training as possible. Finally, you'll move into a competition period where you'll dial back the volume just a bit and get ready for race day. Now let's talk about gear. So we need to divide this in swim gear, bike gear, and run gear. In each category, there are some essentials and then there are some nice to have. So for your swim, the essentials are your goggles, a swimsuit, a swimming cap, a triathlon suit, a wetsuit, and some Vaseline. Now, swimming caps, don't buy too many of those because each time you go to a race, you will get one in your race bag. For swim goggles, all our eyes are different, so we need to try some different brands to find which one works for you. For what it's worth, I use some called Arena Cobra Elite. I like those because they fit my face well, and then they also have a little bit of rubber in between the glasses and my eyes. And it's extremely important that you have some rubber between your glasses and your skin, because sometimes during a race, you might get hit by the eye by another athlete, not on purpose, of course. And if you don't have some rubber, then you will get injured. And I've seen a lot of athletes where this has happened, so you have been warned. So let's talk about the nice to haves. it is very nice to have a pull buoy, some fins, and some paddles. And that's because if you have a pull buoy, it's easier to train your stroke because you don't have to focus on your legs. And if you have fins, it's also a lot easier to do specific drills. And paddles is a great way to just put some extra force on your lats when you're training. Now let's talk about bike gear. For the essentials, of course, you want a bike. You can get a time trial bike or a road bike, depending on the race that you're doing and what you enjoy. If you want to go as fast as possible, then in almost every age group race, it's better to do it on a time trial bike than on a regular road bike. But it also takes a lot of training because if you're not used to staying in that aero position, you will get aches in your back and in your neck and all sorts of places. So just be aware that it takes some more getting used to than just a regular road bike. Next, you need some bottles and some bottle cages for water or energy. You need a watch because you want to keep an eye on not just how far you've come, but also your heart rate and potentially even your watts or your power. Then you want some triathlon shoes with a strap so that you can put them on the bike so that when you are running with your bike from the first transition out onto the bike, then you can jump straight onto the bike instead of having to put on your shoes in transition. Then you can put them on your bike, which saves a lot of time. But also when people put on their bikes in transition and then run with their shoes on, there's a big chance that the clamp underneath the shoe will break and then your race is just over. So don't be that guy. Train yourself to put the shoes on the bike itself. It won't take long, I promise you. If you just take one afternoon to train it with rubber bands, then you will be fine. So do that. Then you need some click pedals because you want to click in with your shoes and don't just have some flat pedals because then you can use your hamstrings to help generate force as well. Then of course you need a triathlon suit so you can swim, bike and run the same thing. You need some gear for punctures, so like a bicycle pump and some bicycle tubes, because if you get a puncture in race, then you are supposed to take care of that yourself. Nobody's coming to help you. So make sure that you train this beforehand at home. It's very simple. You just look up some tutorials on YouTube and you will learn it in no time, I promise. And then as we talked about, some rubber bands for your shoes. Now we get on to the nice to have. Now it's very nice to have a power meter. It's a bit expensive, but then you can see exactly what wattage you are pushing through the pedals, and it makes it so much easier to sort of pace your race, because if you're going long distance and you're just going on feeling, then there's a big chance that when you go to the marathon or the half marathon by the end, that you will run out of gas because you just feel so excited in the beginning and you feel so energized. But it's a long day, and if you have your power meter, then you will be sure to know exactly what you are capable of doing and you can keep within that limit. Then it can be nice to have some chain wax because it looks cool. That's the most important thing, but also it can help reduce friction and just save a bit more watts. Then you want some sunglasses because when you're sitting in your aero position, if you're going fast, like 40 kilometers an hour or above, then sometimes you will get like insects going into your eyes, and that is just so annoying. I've had that happen multiple times, so get some sunglasses. And then something called chamois cream, which is basically just cream you put in your bike pants so you don't get saddle sores. Now let's talk about the run gear. Of course, the essentials is some running shoes. Don't just run in any shoe, get some specific run shoes to run in. It's also nice to have some run apparel, because if you run around training in your tri suit, then people are gonna look. Of course, you still need the triathlon suit and you need the watch as well to keep an eye on your pace and your heart rate. It can be the same watch that you use on your bike to save some cash. Now, in the nice to have category, some bouncy shoes or some super shoes or whatever they call it these days, like the Nike Alpha Flies or Vaporflies or any shoe like that, can come in handy quite a lot. And there's two reasons for this. First, it makes you go faster. It just does. I have never met anyone who does not say that it makes them go faster. Second, it helps you train hard and don't get as sore the next day. So they are very expensive, these shoes, but they can be very well worth the cost. Would start there, but yeah, if I had some extra cash, I would throw some at some bumpy shoes. Next, a running headband can be very nice to have on the run so you don't get too much sweat in your eyes, but yeah, that's personal preference. All right, now it's time to complete your first training sessions. So let's just get straight into it. Now, when you're going for your first swim, it's extremely important that you work on your technique before your quantity. So swimming is a lot more like dancing than like endurance. In swimming, even the smallest details of how your arm enters the water and how your hand is in position to your elbow and your shoulder makes a huge difference. It does not matter how great of a cardiovascular shape you're in. If you don't have the right technique, you're not going to go fast. So technique over quantity. Remember that and you're going to go far. Next, you need to realize that you're training for open water and not just pool swimming. There's a big difference. So in open water, we want to have a high stride. So we want to go fast because there might be some waves, there might be other people going from the side. So the aquadynamics is a bit different or a lot different than in the swimming pool. There's some specific ways to train specifically for swimming, and I recommend that you check this out and go into critical swim speed to see that. It's just a basic test you take and then you can calculate a critical swim speed. And it will give you swim speed training zones. So you got like zone 1 to zone 5 from easy to very hard. It's just a very easy way to sort of structure your training. Next, if you want to learn the freestyle technique, you can click on this link here and it will take you to a video by a Global Triathlon Network about how to get the perfect stroke. Now let's talk about cycling. As mentioned, in cycling we have power and heart rate. And in the most optimal world, you will use both and you will compare the two and you will compare it with your perceived exertion. So that means that you'll see how are your watts doing, how are your heart rate, and what is your perceived effort. And then you'll combine the three to sort of get an understanding of how hard you're training. Then in cycling, the most important thing is to increase your distance. The trainer of Pogacar even said that he does like 80 to 90% of his training in zone 2, and that's on a zone from 1 to 5, and then only 10 to 20% of his training in zone 5. So you just really want to increase your distance. You also really want to think about your energy and make sure you get energy during your training. If you do training for more than 1 hour, then have something with you, like some sugary drink or some gels or something that keeps your energy high. If you want to really nerd it out and do like the Norwegians or do like the professional athletes, then you can measure your lactate. You can buy your own measurement tool for like, I don't know, $1,000 or something. And then you can train with lactate thresholds, which is maybe the best way to train, but also the most complicated. So I wouldn't start there. Now let's talk about your run sessions. So you want to do running drills at the start of every workout because your technique is very important. And that's because of your biodynamics. So if everything else is equal, then the person with the best biodynamics will move faster. You also want to think about your injuries and your injury history. And the most important thing here is to make sure that you do some sort of mobility or a workout with full range of motion and that your progression is significantly slower in running than in swimming and cycling. And that's because in running we have so much more force going up in our bodies than we have in swimming and cycling. So progress slowly in running, slower than you think. I also think it's important to do testing. Actually, that's important in all three disciplines so that you can see if you're moving forward. So have a test like every 12 weeks, like a 5 kilometer max or a 10 kilometer or something like that, or an 800 meter swim or a FTP test on the bike. You need to see if you're getting better. And if you're not getting better in those 12 weeks, then you need to have an explanation for that. Maybe you were sick, maybe you did not get your training in. But if you got your training in and you did not get significantly better, then something is wrong with your training and you need to do some adjustments. Even the best training program in the world is not for everybody, so you need to sort of have your own way of knowing if this is working for you. So do regular tests. If you want to learn more about running technique, I leave a link here as well, so you can go check that out. It's a video that I made, which is called My Science-Based System to Run Fast with No Effort. Now let's talk about strength training. If you have the time, it will be most beneficial to do some strength training throughout the week. And there are some specific principles here as well, where we do some periodization, and I've made a whole video about that. So you can just click this link and then you can see here. It's called How Elite Athletes Build Muscle Extremely Fast. All right, now let's talk about brick sessions. So it's very important to train the transitions from swimming to cycling and from cycling to running. I think that the most important transition is from cycling to running. And I would have one session like this every single week. And that's exactly what I did in my pro career and what most professional triathletes do, just because you need to adapt both mentally and physiologically to the different stressors that happens when you're already fatigued and then you go do something else. And I see that the running technique for most people get significantly worse after cycling, so just be aware of that. There's two different types of ways to do this. If you want to train your transition specifically, then I would do some intervals. So maybe you will go some 5 kilometer cycling and then 1 kilometer run and then 5 kilometer cycling and then 1 kilometer run, and you just keep going like that. Or if you feel more comfortable with your transition, then you can do like a long cycling and then do a long run at the end of it with only one transition. Now let's talk about injury prevention. So follow this rule. Never progress more than 10% of volume every single week and never more than 40% in a month. Next, you can check out the ATG protocol right here, which is something that Knees Over Toes guy has made, and it's really good to prevent injury. So I would check that out if I was you. And then if you want to think more about the mental side, because injuries is both a physiological thing and a psychological thing, then I made a video about that, which is called How the Top 1% Train Nonstop Without Burning Out. So if you want to know more about that, you can check that out here. All right, so step 3. Now you're just going to repeat step number 2 for 4 to 6 times per week for at least 3 to 6 months. Make sure that every single training session you have a goal. You want to get the most out of your time, so don't just turn off your mind and go in and work out. Have a specific goal for each and every single training session. So that might be improving your technique or improving your ability to push yourself or something different, but have a goal and then evaluate yourself at the end of each practice. You will go so much further than almost anyone else if you just do this one thing right. And then you just need to trust the process. Now we're getting closer to race day. So let's talk about transitions. We got 2 different types of transitions. We got T1, which is from swim to bike, and we got T2, which is from bike to run. Now here, a lot of small hacks make a huge difference, and you need to figure out what works for you. So for example, I used to put Vaseline in my shoes because then they would pop on easier, but for some people that just makes them get like these heel scratches, but that worked for me. Or maybe you have your gels lying in your helmet or a cap, so you take it with you on the run and then you put it in your suit. You need to find those small hacks, because those small hacks, they compile, and if you save 1 minute in transition, then imagine how much running you would have to do to save 1 more minute, and you can just do it for free. It's worth looking into. If you want a full transitions guide, I've leave it here as well. You can just push the button right here and it will take you to this video, which is also by Global Triathlon Network, and it's called How to Do a Triathlon Transition Step-by-Step Guide. All right, let's talk about nutrition strategies. So there's something called carb loading, which is worth looking into. It basically means you eat more carbs in the day before the race. Just do a quick Google search and it will show you. Also, caffeine consumption. Well, there's sort of like this effect that if you drink a lot of coffee, then it won't have a huge impact. But if you dial back on your coffee consumption towards race day and then you put it back in on race day, then it will still have a huge effect. So be aware of that. Caffeine will make you better. There's no questions about it. Just do Google search and you'll see. And then the hydration is really important. You need to think about having enough water so that you don't start your race dehydrated. During the race, you need to have some gels and some sports drinks to keep your carbohydrates high and your sugar depots high. But it's important that you have trained using these in training. Don't do something new on race day. Train during that in training. Just like you would train your swim and your cycling and your running, you need to train eating these gels on your bike or when you're running so that you won't get stomach problems. Stomach problems is a big issue in triathlon, and a lot of people get it on race day because they are nervous and then they all of a sudden eat all of the sugar that they're not used to. So don't be that guy. Train this before race day. So for hydration during the race, you want something that has sodium and potassium in it, which is electrolytes, because that will help you hydrate faster. After the race or after training, we go to recovery and you need some protein. Do about 1.7 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. And then you need to sleep at least 8 hours and more if you can each night. It is the best performance enhancer in the world. I made a whole video about that. And of course you need some more carbs to just fill up. You still need to hydrate, don't need to mention more about that. Then it's very beneficial to do a cool down protocol. So what I do is some breathing exercises, just called box breathing, meaning that you breathe in for maybe 4 seconds, then you hold it on top for 4 seconds as well, and then you breathe out also for 4 seconds, and then you hold it on the bottom for 4 seconds as well. Do that for maybe 5 minutes and you will feel like your whole system just calms down and you're ready to recover, because when you have done a race or training, your body is just up, all driving high on energy and adrenaline, and you want to get that down so that you get into recovery mode as fast as possible. Now let's talk about supplements. So there's a lot of different supplements that elite athletes use. I have listed them here, and I've also listed a link to the banned substances so that you don't do something illegal. But you can check all of these out, and the easiest way is just to go to examine.com, and then you can type in what you want to know about, and I can just put in beetroot and it will say all things about beetroot. So that's the easiest way to learn about these things, and as with anything else, try it out in training before you do it on race day. So we've gone through setting up your training program, completing your first training, completing your first 6 months of training, setting up your transitions to save minutes, and optimizing your nutrition to be the best you can be on race day. This is the exact process to become a great triathlete and maybe even qualify for the age group world championships one day. I really hope that you found this valuable. You can find the guide in our free triathlon community, where you can learn all the tactics and everything you need to become the fittest version of yourself in record time, completely for free. And you'll have direct access to me to ask any questions you might have. I'll leave a link to that in the description below and on the top comment of this video, so that you have access to all the resources that you need to become the fittest version of yourself. I think it will be very valuable for you guys. I appreciate you watching this video all the way through, and I can't wait to see you at the start line of the age group world championships. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.